I think before I go on to talking about the LLM in Law and Technology and a few more things about the law school, one of the things that I think we should talk about is how we're going to teach in the year to come. Just I suppose I'd say a few words about that. It has been a very interesting few months, and we've really put a lot of thought into how, in light of public health guidance, we are going to teach our graduate students in the year to come. As things stand, the plan is that our course will remain in essence an on-campus course, and to the degree that's possible in the context of public health guidance, we'll be looking forward to spending time in classrooms with our students in the year to come. In fact, what that means, certainly in the first part of the academic year from September onwards, is that we'll likely operate a system where every week some of our students are in the class with us on a rota basis. So you would all, I would hope, wouldn't go more than a week or two without having an in-person class. At worst, you wouldn't go for more than a week or two without being in class in person. And simultaneously, for students who, because of social distancing arrangements and public health guidelines, who are not in the classroom, then the class will be available to them through this system, through Teams, and through the university's virtual learning environment through Canvas. As restrictions ease across the academic year, then we can bring more and more of our students into the classroom. So that's the plan as it stands now. It will always be guided by public health regulation, and so the safety, your safety, and our safety in entering into classroom buildings. The university's priority at the moment, and the big conversations that are taking place in the university at the moment, are focused on getting those shared spaces open. So getting the library open, getting the graduate school open again, within the boundaries of safety, so that you would have study spaces available to you. And the other thing I suppose I would add is we will look forward to developing a lot of our modules and our courses around interaction in these new ways that are determined by social distancing. So there will be a lot of tuition through Teams and through Canvas, and then also there'll be tuition in the context of in-person interaction, which remains, that conversation element remains an important part of graduate studies, all guided by public health guidelines, and as those guidelines change, we'll change our approach to your education as well. Yes, so let me go back to the slideshow now, and if you have any questions about that, I can't see the chat bar when the slideshow's on, and I'll pick it up at the end, or Gemma will pick it up now. Okay, so the law school is a World Top 100 law school. We occupy a new building that we've been in since 2016, and that building sits directly behind the Lanyon building, the picture you saw at the start of the slideshow. It's a space that's dedicated to you. So there are a number of meeting rooms that you can book. There is a social space on the ground floor where our students congregate, and we have, for instance, a moot courtroom and other teaching spaces within the school. The school as a whole has substantial access to the legal profession in Northern Ireland, as a very old law school in Northern Ireland. We have deep links with the legal profession in Northern Ireland. So we have people coming in and out of the High Court, Court of Appeal all the time. We have a judge in residence, for instance, and we also have deep links with the Northern Ireland Assembly. In fact, the First Minister of Northern Ireland at the moment is a graduate of the law school. We also, Belfast is a very interesting city because it hosts a lot of global law firms and firms in the financial services industry, for instance. And we have spent, including Dahi and I have spent quite a lot of time developing and maintaining relationships with firms who, of course, are very interested in maintaining relationships with us as well, because they're interested in meeting and getting to know our students, our graduate students, because that provides them with the next generation of people who will work with them. So one of the things we've really thought about in designing this master's program is employability, and the way that the program is designed is in part an answer to conversations we've had with employers about what kind of student, what kind of graduate they're very interested in employing. So as I say, the building was open in 2016. We have a moot court, we have interactive teaching spaces. There's the social hub on the ground floor, and also there's a one-button studio where students can go in and record podcasts or pieces to camera for class or off their own bat. They're on the first floor of the law school. Okay, so the LLM in Law and Technology, as I say, this is an innovative and employment-focused program. It draws on our substantial experience in technology and e-governance and innovation. So we're interested really in two things in very broad terms in this program, and employers that we've spoken to are interested in these things. We want our students to be very much aware and to be thinking critically about how law regulates technology, what kind of regulation is required for technology. If you think about speech online, for instance, questions that we might ask are, is law as it is now, is kind of old law sufficient to regulate how people speak to and about each other online, or do we need to think about new kinds of law in order to regulate online interaction? In other words, is the online world simply just a technological set of innovations in which we do very traditional kinds of things, or is the online world a new kind of thing that needs new law? These are the sorts of questions that we're interested in asking. But we're also interested in a very important second aspect of the interaction of law and technology, and that is the role of technology in the practice of law. So we're interested in how judicial decision making might be rendered using algorithms, or indeed how the regulation of crime, or how the interaction of crime and sentencing might take place in the context of algorithms, and the justice and other aspects of that. So these are really the two big themes that that cut across the program as a whole. How does law regulate new technologies? How does it regulate the online world? And how is technology being brought to bear on the practice of law? I don't know, Dahi, do you want to add anything to that, or are you happy enough with that?
No, nothing really to add at this stage. We're looking forward to your questions, and we will be able to talk about some of the specific topics that you will be studying on this, which develop in a bit more detail those two broad themes of law in technology and technology in law, which run throughout the modules that we have.
Thanks, Dahi. That's great. So let's just run on to a few of those modules, and we'll talk through them in a little bit more detail. I'll say a few words, and then maybe last night to fill in if I've missed anything. So in the autumn, you will take the modules that are there in the slideshow, regulating innovation and law and the challenges of technology. You can think of these modules as, again, in very broad brush terms, as one being about private aspects of law. So how do we regulate innovations, the creation of online platforms, etc. And the other module will be about technology and technological governance. So the development of smart cities, robot judges, so algorithmic judicial decision making, etc. We will also have a module on law and technology and project-based learning, and this really runs to the heart of the program's ethos. So what we'll be doing there is allowing the students to take on little bits of research and then perform a bit of client presentation. So in other words, to take an example, somebody might be tasked with giving advice in the wake of a data breach. What are the steps that that a client might need to take in the context of a data breach? So there'll be a bit of project that you will complete, and what we'd want to see at the end of that is you being able to present your findings and the advice that you've got for a client in the context of that. And then also there's a module that all law master's students take called Approaches to Legal Research, where we will talk to you about the kinds of ways that we can ask questions in legal research, and moving on from that, then how we can apply methods to our research, especially with a view towards your dissertation. And finally, in the autumn, you'll have a choice between one of two modules. One is computational methods and skills, and the other one is cybersecurity in action. As we see it, if you have, if you're already quite au fait and quite advanced in programming, for instance, then we would probably advise you to take the cybersecurity in action module that is run by our colleagues in the computer science and at the university. Otherwise, within the law school, and specifically for this program, we have a module on computational methods and skills. You don't need any experience with computer programming or technology in order to take this master's at all, and specifically in order to take this module. It is very much an introductory space where we will introduce you to some of the key tenets and basic tenets in computer programming. Why do we have a module like this in a law program? It's not to turn you into a computer programmer. It's because lawyers increasingly have to interact with people on the technological sides of firms and discuss with them how certain practices can be rendered online. So it's just about developing a certain degree of comfort with computing concepts. The plan with that module will be really to look at tabular data and then manipulate it to develop results and develop a few graphs using Python, a programming language called Python. So it'll be very much introductory, and its aim is really to give you a few skills that then you can bring back into your own research and you can bring into the workplace. In the spring then, we have a series of electives that you'll take 3 of, broadly speaking. One is leadership and innovation skills for law students, and that's the module that I described earlier when I was talking about the graduate school. So it acts as a credit-bearing kind of home for some of the work that the graduate school does. Again, looking at client counselling, developing projects, and managing projects and indeed leading them. So this is a real, at the core of this program is developing knowledge around technology and the interaction of law and technology, but also very much a focus on on skills and thinking about those skills that are required to get you started and to get you working in this area where we encounter the interface of law and technology. We'll have other modules, for instance, data privacy and the law, that looks at the interaction of privacy and data, regulating digital communications, so it's about speech online, etc., and copyright in the digital environment, that really looks at intellectual property law specifically within a digital environment. Dahi, do you want to add anything to what I've said?
I can just say a couple of words about those modules. What they do is they build upon the foundations of the first semester. So you were introduced to a range of themes in law and technology, and then can develop your own program. Many of the modules will be addressing fairly unresolved issues. So for instance, in copyright and the digital environment, topics in recent years have included things like the application of copyright to creative material that's been generated with the aid of artificial intelligence systems. Data privacy and the law looks at the recent adoption of new data protection law in the European Union and how that's currently being implemented and seeing its first challenges and regulatory decisions. What we're trying to do is introduce you to these topics, but putting an emphasis on areas where there's still a lot of debate or development, and where the law itself is not particularly certain yet.
Thanks, Ty. That's great. We also, give you the choice to take a number of other electives that are shared with a business law program. These are international financial law that looks at how financial services work in the context of globalization, the legal and regulatory infrastructure that sits around that. Business and human rights, that examines really new an upcoming area in business law, which is the regulation of the interaction of global business conduct with human rights frameworks and how those are developed and realized. European law and economic integration, that really focuses down on policy and law around the European Union, of course, around the United Kingdom's relationship with the European Union now. Medical law and ethics, again, an area that has quite a lot of application for people who are interested in the interaction of law and technology. So in this case, medical technologies, and comparative competition law, which examines the legal framework and actually a social and legal framework around competition. One of the things that we're always interested in this law school, and it comes out in all of these modules, is that law is an institution that operates in and on society and responds to society. So we're very much focused on social and legal studies on that interaction. If we're studying, to take one example, business and human rights, for us, knowledge of the framework and familiarity with the frameworks, the Ruggie principles, for instance, on business and human rights, the United Nations level, is not enough. We need to think about how companies talk about themselves, how they report, and indeed what the problem is, and how this problem is described and defined within from a variety of perspectives. And indeed, when we're talking about, for instance, digital communications, it's not enough to know the legal framework. We have to think about how these problems are defined. And so once we have a sense of how problems are defined and how the policy around problems, perceived problems, is rendered, then we get a better sense of how law is being used to respond to the problem, and indeed how law is acts as a frame around which we can develop social understandings and the like. Okay, so your master's program is a 12-month program, full-time, normally 2 years part-time, and each semester, each kind of 12-week block takes up a third of the program. We think in credits, there's a third of your credits, broadly speaking, with some variety sit in each program. So you'll spend your first year taking the autumn module, sorry, your first semester taking the autumn modules, your second semester taking the spring modules, and then across the summer, really from kind of late April, May, you'll be working on a dissertation under supervision. So it would be on an area relevant to law and technology of your choice. You make a proposal, and then if we can supervise it, we will. And so you'd be assigned with an expert who will then help you define the kinds of questions you're asking, think about how those questions can be turned into a project, and then we'll review some of your work as you go on. Normally, our dissertation module is split into 2 phases. In the early phase, you'll be under quite close supervision, and you'll be working with somebody. This is the phase when really you're defining and scoping out a project. And then in the second phase, you'll be writing up towards a deadline that normally speaking is in the middle of September every year. We do have an option on the dissertation module, and that is the dissertation in practice. And where within this dissertation, if you have had placement experience or if you have workplace experience, then you can bring that into the dissertation. We strongly encourage that if you do, that you talk with us if you do have this experience. So you, within this dissertation, you'll spend a bit of the space writing a learning journal. What skills did I develop during my placement? How did it help me think about what skills I need to develop next? And indeed, what surprised me, you know, the things that I've encountered on a placement or in the workplace that didn't resonate with things that I heard in class and that I was talking about in class, or indeed, conversely, was there something that that was being spoken about in class where I've developed some experience about how that operates in the workplace? Because again, we're very interested in law being brought into operation in businesses and other social institutions. And the law school has, as I said, very close links with employers, and certainly with this program, a number of employers have expressed an interest in the kinds of students that will be taking these programs, the kinds of skills that will be developed in these programs. So we hope over time that there will be placements that are available to you. I would caveat with that by saying that there is, of course, a lot of uncertainty right now about how placements take place, about how placements can be made available, especially in the context of working from home. So I know that a number of our students who are currently looking forward to going on placements have had the placement starts delayed, for instance, as their employers focus on exactly how will a placement work in this context. So there is a bit of uncertainty around placements in general across the UK economy. It's something that we'll be keeping a very strong eye on. But nonetheless, this option is there, and while it can't be guaranteed, we think it's a valuable part of the programme. Okay. So why study in Belfast? Well, as I said earlier, there are a lot of firms situated in Belfast. And actually, for a law and technology program, they're doing very interesting things. So a lot of them are working as in close relationship with branches, especially in London, and also at times in New York. And they're working very closely on technological matters a lot of the time. So I'll give one example of one firm, for instance, that is has a project on at the moment on e-discovery. So when there's a piece of litigation ongoing, there's a discovery process. So lawyers are going through large volumes of documents, boxes and boxes of documents. And the question becomes, how can we actually do this electronically? How can we search these documents electronically and think about those practices? So that sort of thing is going on, but more generally as well, technology firms themselves need have their own interactions with law firms, and law firms are thinking a lot about about using technology. And the last thing I'd say about it is one of the things that certainly Dahi and I have encountered when we've been speaking with law firms is that say there is no such thing anymore as the pure practice of law. You actually, when you're in this area and in this space, a lot of the time you're there as a legal advisor, but you're also giving business advice and you're talking about markets. And so the boundaries of what it is to be in legal practice have blurred a little bit in the last maybe 10 years or maybe a little bit longer. And you become a legal advisor who is also delivering a core piece of the business advice that businesses are getting. So that element of literacy around technology, literacy around the problems created by technology, but also generally around business are key in what businesses are looking for in graduates these days. So we've a substantial history in Belfast as a technology, a destination for financial technology investment, for instance, and we came third in FinTech Location of the Future, a league table in 2019 behind London and Singapore. So we have quite a growing FinTech financial technology sector as well. So I'll just move on to fees, and then we can turn to discussion and questions about anything that you like. So the Northern Ireland and EU student fee for 2020 entry is £6,140. If you are from the rest of the UK, from Great Britain, the fee is £6,900 for a 2020 entry. There are there are student loans available, of course, for students from Northern Ireland. And there are a number of scholarships on the School of Law website. There's a link to it there. I would advise you very strongly to go and look at the scholarships. There are not very many, and they can be quite competitive. But if you're eligible, apply. You know, there have been times when I've seen scholarships that there have been not very many applications for them, and then when I meet the students, I kind of think a number of these students could have applied for this and been in the competition. So do apply if you're eligible for a scholarship. As I say, there's not very many, but it's always good to get your hand in. For international students, the fee is £16,900 for 2020 entry. There are a number of fee discounts and early bird awards and scholarships available as well for students from beyond the European Union, indeed for students who are international students but have already studied with us, there are loyalty scholarships. So again, take a look at whether you're eligible, and if you're eligible, apply, would be my advice. Okay, and so there's my contact details. Kieran O'Kelly. I'm at c.o'kelly@qub.ac.uk, and I'm always very, very happy to take to receive an email with a query. Neither Dahi or I are marketing people. We're academics. We want to make sure that a program is right for you, and so we're very happy to give you advice about that. And that's the end of the presentation. So I'll just switch it off so I can see what questions have come up. And let me try and scroll upwards and start at the top, if that's okay. Okay. Hello, Clinton from Kenya. How many students do we expect to have in our program for this year, Norman? It's always very hard to tell, I have to say. And the reason it's very hard to tell is because these things do vary year on year. I would expect that this will be a relatively small program. By that I mean we'll have between 10 and 20 students on the program. From my perspective, that is a really good size for a master's program. You don't want it to be too small because then the interaction kind of fades, but you don't want it to be too big because it becomes impersonal, and we pride ourselves a little bit on trying to develop a relationship with our students. In terms of in-class study hours expected of students, with a master's program, of course, the classroom time and the time you spend interacting with people like me is secondary to the time you spend researching yourself in terms of the quality of the learning. We're trying to help you to develop as an independent researcher all the time. So in terms of hours, I would expect that in any week it can vary week to week because we have short modules and they're, the timetable can vary from week to week. But the minimum I would expect you to be spending in class in a week would be 6 hours. It might be that in a certain week there could be up to 8 to 10 hours of classroom time. But the key institution for you, in a way, is the library, whether that's the library's resources online or the physical library itself, which is quite a lovely building. So thanks for that, Antoinette. I hope that's a helpful answer. Is there a real client, Norman, in the project-based learning? From time to time, we would hope there to be a real client in the sense that employers have expressed interest in collaborating with us on that project. Can I guarantee that? Right now, I can't, because we're at a moment when our employer contacts are somewhat disrupted. So we always have a plan B, which is, as you put it, the mock case, where we'll develop what I would call kind of a vignette, a story about a client, and our students respond to that. Employers will continue to need to employ graduates, and the project-based learning course is developed around creating a simple infrastructure within which they can interact with us by giving us a problem and then hosting a presentation at the start. So I'm optimistic about it, but I can't guarantee it right now, because even though this happens in the autumn, it's still very early to do that. I hope that's a helpful answer. It was a good question. What's the upper limit for this course? If I'm interested in many modules, could I take all of this? Well, we don't want to overburden you. The upper limit for the course, what's the maximum number of students? I think once we get above 30 or 40 students, we start talking about double teaching, for instance. But my expectation with this course is we won't arrive at that point. If you're interested in, you can only take so many modules for credit, because we build up credit load like that. But anybody who's interested in a module that they're not taking for credit should come and talk to us, and we'll arrange for them to audit it, which means that it goes onto their transcript and says this student attended this module, they audited the module, but they didn't do it for credit, which always tends to stand for our students. How many elective modules in total are we going to study? Normally 3, but some of them carry slightly different credit loads. So you might take what's effectively a half module, in which case you would take 2 half modules to make up the load of 1. So between 3 and 4, I think, is a good indication of that. But if you're taking 4, there would be 2 half modules and 2 whole modules, etc. Is there an option for online classes? If yes, is the cost the same? Yes, of course, the cost of university tuition is set by the university, not by the law school. And I assume, Clinton, what you're asking is, can you study wholly online and not be in Belfast at all? We will work very hard over the summer to ensure that our students have a substantial online resource, and we have already worked very hard with our existing students to create an online experience for them, or a blended experience. But as things stand, this is a course where we hope to spend some of our time, at least, with you face to face. And as restrictions lift, over the next 6 months to a year, we would be looking to spend more time with you face to face. So there isn't this isn't a distance learning program as of yet. Why do we want to spend time with you face to face? Because we do think there's a lot of value to that, and there's value to getting to know you and those in-person conversations. With that said, this will be accompanied by and supplemented by quite a deep set of online resources for you to interact with. I think Dahi and I would agree that providing a platform online through which you can manage your own learning is very, very important, but also simply getting to know you is important too. I don't know, Dahi, do you want to come back on any of that?
I think I'd add to that the online resources for students on the programme, which are already in development for the year ahead, will give you some opportunities to, I suppose, to see some of the technological issues, to talk through in more details. I mean, one of the interesting things about teaching law and technology is that we are all users of different technologies, different systems, different platforms. And so, for instance, if we're studying something like the way in which terms and conditions operate, we would be asking you to explore how the services you use and maybe the services you don't use go about that process. So there's a kind of an ongoing engagement, even though discussions are taking place in classrooms. Reflecting on your own use of different technologies and different services is something that we always encourage, and we try to build into our program. I might also say, Kieran, that brings in the way in which students select their research topics for a dissertation. Now, because this is a taught master's program, there's no expectation at all that you know what you're going to write your dissertation on when you start the program. That's something you choose with support while you're here with us. But to give an illustration of the types of law and technology dissertations or research projects that we've had across the school, even in recent years, we've had students look at topics with broad societal as well as legal implications. So recently we've had a project on the regulation of drones and how legal systems have sought to adapt to technological changes as well as the development of new products and services. We've had a student look at the application of rules on gambling within the computer game sector. Again, exploring how markets and practices change quite quickly. We've got one of our current master's students looking in some detail at proposals to deal with what are called online harms in the United Kingdom, where there's been a series of initiatives from the government, but not yet legal change. So the student in this case is looking at how other jurisdictions have sought to do that and what lessons have been learned. We have a project reflecting on the European Union's recent adoption of new copyright provisions, which seek to place more responsibilities on those who operate certain platforms, again with broad cultural and economic implications as well as the legal question. We don't know what the research topics will be next year, because that would be for you to determine. But every year when we have undergraduate and graduate research projects in law and technology, we often see very novel, very interesting areas being explored by students with the support of myself, Kieran, and our colleagues.
Thanks very much, Dahi. I would say this is what makes our jobs kind of exciting, is seeing what projects come in. I'm personally, I very much like seeing projects coming in that actually employ technology to do the research. So, for instance, in text mining, etc. Clinton, you're asking about application charges. As it stands, there is no charge to apply. There are, of course, early bird discounts, etc. So if you want to avail of an early bird discount, if you're eligible for it, then you have to apply by a certain date. But on this program, there is no deposit. And we do have other programs where there are deposits, but not with this one so far. I think I've answered all of the questions that that you put up. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add? I will tell you that since we started this webinar, when we started, the sun was shining. The sun is not shining anymore outside my window, but I expect in 5 minutes it will again. Does anybody have any other questions? What will be your next steps and when? Nala, are you asking about application? If you simply go to the portal, the application portal for the university. Gemma, I wonder if you could find a link to the DAP, which is our international portal, and put it in the chat there. Then you can simply apply. And the applications it's relatively straightforward, and they're processed unless a complication arises, processed by the Central University. Jakob, you are a final year LLB student at Queen's. What's the deadline for applications? The deadline for applications is as long as you've applied before the program starts. I think we'd be happy. So in other words, if you get to the end of August and you feel like applying, then that's fine. Again, watch out for loyalty discounts, etc. You know, make sure that the dates for eligibility don't pass. But we don't work on that basis. Approximate start dates are the last week in September. So we are planning to be back teaching according to the published timetable, which is September, I think the 29th. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what it is, but the end of September. So I sit in a lot of what we call major instant team meetings, and there has been no talk whatsoever about delaying that date, and I wouldn't expect that that's delayed. But as Gemma says, if you're an international student, make sure you leave time for your visa. Okay. Nala, I hope I answered your question, but let me know if I didn't, or if I was answering a different question. And indeed, just drop an email. Anybody can drop me an email if they have any questions. Ting, if you have a conditional offer, if for instance it's conditional on graduation from a course you're on right now, do let us know as soon as possible once you meet the conditions in the offer, and that should get processed very, very fast. Once you let us know that, or let the application portal know that you've met the conditions, if there is a delay, feel free to contact me or contact the School of Law, and we'll see why the delay exists. Sometimes it can be because there's a further question, and sometimes it's just one of those things. Okay, thanks very much, Dahi and Gemma, for getting out information on the new academic year. That's great. Has anybody else got any questions? No. Of course, coming from Ireland, I could sit here and talk to you for the next hour about the weather, but I won't. So yes. Oh yes, Deirdre, thank you very much for reminding me. We did hold a major event with employers in February. We had 40 employers in the room with us, and this program was the focus of that event. And so this was, I think, one of really the things that we're interested in as a law school, and specifically to my mind in terms of graduate studies, is that we are listening to employers very, very closely and trying to understand on your behalf what their priorities are. And of course, employer offers employer priorities can change according to what's new, and they can change perhaps a little bit faster than the questions that we want you to address, which very often can take on a kind of a classic general component. But we're very, very interested always in listening to our employers, and that meeting was very helpful, not least in thinking about at the micro level how we design this program to the best of your advantage. I think somebody may have had their hand up. Did somebody want to ask a question on the mic? Was it Stuti? Maybe not.
Hello, so I'm really
Hello.
sorry I had to turn my audio on. I wasn't able to find the chat box. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So I have just one question to ask you. I just wanted to know that since a lot of students who had applied this year are planning to defer their applications to the next year because of the current pandemic, I was wondering if the teacher-student ratio would be affected next year by any chance, or is there any sort of an adjustment being made for students who have had to defer their applications and the chances that it lowers students?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, if you need to defer, you ought to and speak with the admissions office about that and ask me by email if there's any issue there, and we'll try and get you sorted out. I don't really expect it to be a shift in the staff-student ratio in any significant way. I wouldn't worry about that. So in terms of the quality of the education you get, I don't think that there would be a disadvantage whether you come this year or the following year. I think, you know, broadly speaking, it'll be the same thing. Of course, one of the things that happens from one year to the next on a master's program is new big questions arise, and so some of the content changes. We respond to events in the world and to the way that law is interacting with society. Beyond that, I wouldn't expect that to take place. Of course, love to see you this year or next year, whenever it best suits you in the circumstances to join us. I hope that's a helpful
Thank
answer.
you so much. Yeah,
That's
thank
it.
you so much. Have a good
I'm
day.
very good at long answers, but I'm not very good at accurate answers, so hopefully that's helpful. Is anybody else? No? Okay, well, I think we'll wrap this up on the hour. Thanks very much for spending the time with us. I hope it's been helpful. Let's not let this be the end of the conversation. If you have any questions for me or questions that you'd like to ask Dahi or Gemma, just get in touch. And if you can't find contact details, then please let us know. I should mention as well, I should have said at the start, Deirdre, thanks very much for mentioning the February event. Deirdre is our employability and outreach officer and administrator, and is doing a wonderful job again with a real focus on this program in terms of maintaining and building our relationships with employers. So we have a full-time capacity in school thinking about employability skills and thinking about those networks that we need to maintain and develop. I think I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much again, and I hope the rest of your day goes well. Thank you.